Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. Okay, so I just connected my audio device again because I think it was having issues. Okay, issues aside, welcome to my live stream. What I'm going to be working on today is Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We're going to finish coloring page 164. I feel better. I feel more powerful. I have Jim said back in the saddle again, mute. Yeah, I have stew in my stomach, some beautiful stew that my wife made. It was delicious. And oh no, Philip said, damn you, Kremble, I was just about to go live. Oh, I feel like Philip, I'll go for a little bit and then I'll send everybody your way. I didn't realize you were about to go live. I'm so sorry. So basically I just wanted to kind of finish up the colors on page 164 of Not Death But Love and kind of hang out. I have a nice fresh cup of tea, kindly brewed by my sister-in-law, and a belly full of stew. And I've managed to evade the vampires, and what was the werewolf one? I can't remember. The werewolves, I think. Anyhow, if you guys were watching the last live stream, some fun inside jokes came from that. Boom. Okay, here's our art as we're streaming. And we're just going to kind of think out loud, work on personal projects, make it happen. Right now what I'm doing is basically picking all of the different basically like clouds in the sky. And I think this panel is going to take a little bit of time to finish. And then hopefully the last few panels, I don't think they're quite as complicated. So they might go by fairly quickly. We got Dylan rejoining us. Hello, Dylan, again. Hopefully while we had a break, it gave you guys a chance to get your food as well. To regroup, to reassess, to find your purpose in life, find out what your arc is that you're supposed to build amid a stormy day. Philip said, I'm going to start. I'll just check in once in a while. Well, Philip, I will try to check in as well. I'll try to check in over there. I never like crossing streams. I always feel bad for crossing the streams. Paul said, you got me fired for... Wait, let's see. Fired up. I'm setting up to animate more. Nice. Yes. Yes. If you felt like you were in this world to animate, it's time to animate. By the way, you guys should check out Paul Pate's comics. They're amazing. They're on Amazon. They're very, very encouraging. So I've mentioned that I have guitar acquisition syndrome. I really like buying guitars. I think I've mentioned that multiple shows. I love the feeling you get from a new guitar, the inspiration you get from a different sound. Yes. Oh my goodness, my wife bought me a Monster while they were getting snacks. How sweet is she? How amazing. So anyhow, I'm having a cup of warm tea, and I am I'm proud of myself for avoiding buying guitars for the last month, because it's guitar month at Sweetwater. So I kind of feel like that's like if you have a gambling addiction, driving through Vegas might be a real dangerous thing to do, you know? If you have guitar acquisition syndrome, being online when Sweetwater has their guitar sale is a dangerous place to be. Very dangerous. But anyhow, speaking of guitar acquisition syndrome, basically, I am gonna play a little bit of a sneak preview of a song I recorded today. Dylan was saying he's having trouble choosing which stream. I don't know. I didn't know Philip was going to be streaming around the same time. So if you want to watch Philip, I won't be offended, Dylan. You're always here. I don't mind. Choose wisely. No, I'm just kidding. It's totally cool if you want to hang with Philip. He's a talented guy. Anyhow, so I have been kind of peeking at Goodwill. There's the Goodwill, for those of you who don't know, the thrift store, the Goodwill in the US has all kinds of like used items that are at thrift stores like all across the country, and you can search for them and bid for them on the goodwill.com. And so if you guys have been following this channel, like back to like the time where I took like a classical guitar, like that I got for like $15. And yeah, Jim was saying combine the streams. That would be cool, but I don't have Video Ninja. I'd love to do that. I don't have Video Ninja set up though. Although I guess if maybe I could, I don't know. It would be a whole thing. Reaction, that's true. That would be hilarious. I think I should put Philip's stream on here and then react to it, but I don't want to poach views. I don't want to poach views from Philip. So instead, I'm gonna color my page, and hopefully, you know, hopefully I won't take that long. That's my goal, is like to be kind of done with this fairly quickly. Dylan was saying maybe you two could be in each other's streams. Yeah, that's the only problem, is it takes a little bit of time to set up Video Ninja. So I by the time I have that set up, it might be too late. Although I'm not sure what platform Philip's using to stream. Maybe, I don't know. Anyhow, if Philip wanted me on, we could do a combined. I wish he was still in the chat so I could mention that, but I would be more than happy to do that. But so yeah, so basically the Goodwill has this like site, and the list, like it's basically a way to like thrift shop on like at every Goodwill across the US, which is kind of cool. So these are like thrift stores where people, you know, donate items that, you know, they've outlived or outgrown. And usually they're sold at like a really low cost for poor people like myself. And since I was a kid, I've loved thrift stores. There's something really fun about, like, you know, especially when I was in high school, it was really fun to look through these thrift shops and like find really cool clothes that cost like 50 cents a shirt, you know. And every once in a while you'd find just like a gem. But anyhow, also, every once in a while, you might find a gem of a guitar that somebody hadn't really, you know, paid a lot of attention to. So I'm always kind of peeking, keeping an eye out at that, keeping an eye on guitar deals all across the country and all that kind of stuff. But the reason I'm mentioning this is I took some of that energy today and I finished my 6th song for, I think I don't remember how many solo albums I've done, but it's the 6th song for the next solo album. And I kind of want to show you guys what that is. How long before you finish this book and what's next? So it has to be finished. Absolutely has to be finished by January. So the beginning of January, the end of December is when I'm aiming to get this all completely finished. And then that's going to be for a September release. Initially, we were trying for a June release, but the further I got on this book, the more it just started becoming clear that it's going to have to be released in September, which means they need it by January. So if that answers your question, Paul. And then he said, what's next? What's next will be 2 Stories Book 2. So I'm going to hop on 2 Stories Book 2. That I already have really good progress on. I don't know if you guys remember back when I was streaming while I was making book 2 of 2 Stories, but I got really far on it. Like, I have the whole book pretty much like comped out and ready to go. All the roughs are done for it and stuff like that. Did you hear that Nepal was overthrown by Gen Z and voted for their new ruler on Discord? I didn't, and I don't know enough about Nepal. You know what? I'll admit ignorance. I don't even know where Nepal is. Where is Nepal? But that's great. That's interesting. Got overthrown, huh? There was something I was thinking about the other day regarding that, like overthrows and stuff like that. I was thinking about like the cycle of hate the other day. And I was realizing sometimes I will fall into this cycle, right? Where you kind of will come up with justifications to be mad at someone for something. And then you kind of justify bad behavior in return just because you're like, well, this person wronged me, so therefore I can wrong them. And one of the things I was thinking about recently is like that whole like old like turn the other cheek thing. I'm the right here. I don't know what the right here is. Nepal Nepate. Oh, I see. That took me a second. Thanks for clarifying it, Jim. I couldn't connect it. Paul got overthrown? Paul, are you okay? Paul's like, I'm deposed right now. I'm in the chat room during my deposition, I guess. Anyhow, so I've been thinking about it, like, there's like that whole like turn the other cheek thing, and it's always kind of confused me and been a little hard to kind of follow in my life, because there are times where people like really mess with you or something, and then you really feel like, well, how in this scenario could I ever turn the other cheek? Like, or you just can easily think of like a hypothetical where you would be wronged in some way, where it would be really hard to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to let this go and not react in kind. I think in our nature as people is to like tend to be like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth kind of thing, where it's like, justice and this sense of justice and stuff like that kind of drives us to like justify like horrible behavior as humans. Anyhow, I've been thinking about this recently. And I've been realizing, like, pairing this with the idea of, I've talked about this on stream before, but like, I've read a little bit more and more about determinism, and I'm not going to make this a determinism based, conversation or anything. It's just, going through my thinking here. But I am pretty convinced that determinism is real, meaning like, I don't know how much even though we have the semblance of choice for behavior, I don't know how much people actually choose what they do. Like, I think more times than not, choice is an illusion. This is just, and again, I'm not fully convinced of this, but I definitely, and I don't think it takes away responsibility of agency, but it started to dawn on me that, like, if people don't have a choice in what they become, and we really are just sort of products of our environment or our genes or, like, you know, different occurrences that have happened, and those are what are driving our choices. I don't think this should make individuals feel like, sweet, well, then I can do whatever I want, right? I think it should more make us, and this is my own thought for myself, right? I'm not being prescriptive here. I'm being descriptive. I hope that makes sense. But I realize it should make me very leery to, like, jump on a bandwagon of judgment against another person, or of justifying bad behavior on my part. I don't know if that makes sense. So, yeah, Dylan saying, I never really understood that. Like, how far should you go in turning your cheek? Turn our cheek and let bad things happen? Yeah, so I've been thinking about this lately, and then I've been thinking about just, like, the cycle of history, because there's a lot of dark things and dark times where I live, like, in our country, in general, in the US. And I don't want to get into, like, specific events or anything like that. But, you know, there's just, like, the feeling that, you know, people are so at odds that they're going to start killing each other, kind of feeling, where you look at it and it almost seems like inevitable. Like, it's things are going to get dark. And then I was just thinking about history, because I had to teach, like, US history, world history, and civics, like, over the summer, a couple summers ago. Actually, it wasn't summer. I'm sorry. It was in spring, I think, last year. And something kind of dawned on me from that experience. Like, the whole history of civilization is kind of based on people kind of live together. They'll cohabitate. They'll get along. And then there'll be some kind of wrong done by someone. And then that wrong creates a reaction of some kind, like a cascading reaction. And so it'll be something like, somebody does something horrible, like a murder, or, like, steals somebody's property or something, like, awful. And what'll happen is, like, even if it's not receiving retribution, like, actively, that wrong will receive, like, retroactive retribution. So, like, generations later, maybe the person who wants retribution doesn't have the ability to give it, and then they'll have kids, and their kids will hear this story of the wrong done to their father, and then the children of that person will take vengeance for their father on another group of people because of what their fathers had done. And you see this just repeat over and over again throughout history. And then that wrong done in the name of justified by the wrong done to them cascades into this tit for tat scenario where everyone's fighting everyone. Like, everyone's been wronged in some way and has a justification for violence. Like, and then that violence itself kind of creates a response that's violent. And there's guys throughout history, like, you know, who are kind of revered for kind of pointing this out. Sins of the father. Dylan said that. I hate that thought. I do too, but it's in history. I mean, it's just repeats in history where it's generations taking out generational anger that in a weird way you could see a justification for, you know, or retributive justice, right? Where it's like a wrong was done, so a wrong needs to be done to make up for the wrong that was done. Anyhow, so I just look at this in history, just kind of like this cycle of like violence that just inevitably happens when human beings try to cohabitate and live together. And then I see these historical figures that almost like, as cliche as it is, they see through kind of like the matrix of that. Like they actually will like look at it. And I hate using the matrix now because it's so overused by like weird political pundits and stuff. But you have these like key figures in history. You got like people like Christ or Gandhi or Martin Luther King, like these figures in history that look at this cycle of violence, like, and this just endless violence, and kind of do the math on it and go like, wait a minute, if everybody's just doing retributive violence, right, in response, in retribution to like cleanse the wrong done to them or the wrong done to their people or whatever, and you continue that cycle, we're so many generations away from the first people to ever inhabit the earth, right? We're so many generations away that like all of us could pull from history like some kind of horrible wrong done to some ancestor of ours and use it to justify heinous acts, right? And then here's the thing, like, where does this cycle stop? Like, that's what I'm kind of getting at. Yeah, Dylan was saying it doesn't make sense. It really shouldn't make sense. And so like you have these figures that kind of took like a tall view, like they flew the plane a little higher into the air and they could see the continents and how connected everyone was. And they could see that like we're just on this tiny little pinball of a dot, that honestly all of us are pretty lucky to live on, right? It's almost an accident that human beings are even able to survive or live on this fragile, like weird ecosystem that we all cohabitate on. Like we all live on this tiny dot, like this speck in the universe, right? And we're lucky to do so. And I think some people just take like that large view of things, like some of these rare figures in history, and they started doing the math on the cycle of violence and realizing, like, wait a second, if like every time we're wronged, we wrong in return, right? If we do just total retribution for every wrong done, it just creates another wrong to get retribution. Like it's a cycle that's nonstop, and kind of like realize that the only way to break the cycle, right, is to just refuse to participate in it. And so that's where you have like, like that's why I was bringing up like Christ or Gandhi or like Martin Luther King. It's like to refuse to participate in the cycle of violence. And I noticed that like YouTube's lagging. Hopefully it'll come back. So yeah, that's just something I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about it because like I've realized that I need to work on that myself, because my instinct in general. Let me see. Maybe I have too many things open. I'm gonna just close out the extra things I have open. Let me know in the chats too if I'm like kind of cutting in and out. But it's for me, it's been really important to kind of come across that idea and realize that I'm not the most unvengeful person that I can be. Like I definitely am a person who, if I see someone wronged, I want justice, right? If someone wrongs me, I want justice. Like I don't want to just let it go. I don't want to let it roll off my back. And I think that's a very natural response. I don't even think it's technically wrong, but it makes me realize like with kind of like looking at the kind of powder keg. Yeah, Dylan's saying it's like the abused becoming the abuser. Yeah, and looking out at like the kind of powder keg that's kind of the country I live in right now. I just don't see where the cycle stops unless people are able to actually just turn the other cheek and let it go. Like, I know it's weird, but it's like the turning the other cheek thing makes a little more sense to me, because it's like, what is the other alternative? It's just we all destroy each other, you know? And like, that's the thing that's like really, I don't know, it just hit home to me a couple days ago. It was interesting, you know, just to think about, because it was like, oh, like I need to personally get better at forgiveness and that kind of thing in my own life, because just rationally, it actually is kind of the only thing that can stop just the endless cycle of like, you know, people just wanting to wrong each other, you know, because they were wronged, you know. I don't know if that makes sense. So that was something I thought about the other day. But it is weird when you look at history, because it's like, it's the same thing. You'll have these like civilizations kind of crop up and everybody's kind of getting along until somebody wrongs somebody. And then there's like just this tit for tat escalation. And before you know it, it's like this cycle, you know? Yeah, what's the way out of that, you know? It's interesting to me. You know? So yeah, I kind of think I need to, like, at least for me, because you know, in the last year or so, I've felt some what I think is pretty justified anger about some things, you know, outside like that, especially political things in this country. And I found that, you know, it's very easy to justify anger or hate about something. Like, it's really like, it's easier than it should be for me to do that. And it's been an interesting exercise of like kind of thinking, well, where does that stop though? Like, if you start that and you start feeding that, like, what stops that from escalating and stops everybody from just like annihilating each other, you know? And so that's where like that humility and turning the other cheek stuff, maybe I'm just becoming an old hippie or something, but it's like, it's starting to make more sense to me than it did, because there's a rationality to it. And it goes against our very instincts, right? Our very instincts are like to wrong the guy who wronged us. I mean, like, some of our favorite stories are like, you know, like Kill Bill is a great, like, it's so fun. I love that movie. But what's so fun about it, right? You're watching this person, you know, like, just hand out retribution and justice for the wrong that was done to them, right? We like seeing that. And so it feels really counterintuitive to be like to just let it go, you know, to just refuse to participate in that cycle. That feels really wrong, right? But I'm starting to think that might be a good way to go. So I want to know your guys' thoughts on that. I don't know if that's crazy. Is that like stupid hippie talk? You know, I don't know. Because, yeah, I'm just looking at myself. I'm stunned at how easily I'll use, you know, like somebody wronging someone, especially the part of me that, like, you know, I think I've told you guys, and if you've read any of my comics, you'll know I grew up, you know, being bullied. And so I hate bullies. There's nothing that makes me more mad than like a bully, like somebody picking on someone like less strong than them. That boils my blood, right? And I think that's a very justifiable thing. But at the end of the day, the problem is it all can be justifiable if we try hard enough to find justification. I don't know if that makes sense. It's like,
Yeah, Dylan was saying I do have to work on that too. Yeah, it's just a weird thing that I noticed about myself, and it's again, this is a descriptive conversation, not a prescriptive. Like, I'm not trying to say this is how everyone should conduct themselves. It's just more like, for me, it was really interesting as a trail of thought, and then especially considering if determinism is at all true, then the idea of being slow to judge, like, should be just like a no-brainer, right? If determinism's more true than and the more I read about it, the more it seems like it is. Boy, should I cool my jets on like judging other people, because it really is one of those walk a mile in their shoes, like kind of thing. Who knows what led that person to do the awful thing they did? And so, I don't know. It's interesting to me. It's like I really, when I look at it, I'm trying to think of another way, but I don't really see another way that all of this cycle stops unless, and then the frustrating part is, and this is what I've been thinking about, because it's like, but can it stop, right? Because here's the thing. Let's say you're in like a completely dominated world where there's one person just instigating violence over and over again, and you keep turning your cheek, and to an extent, what happens when that leads to just total extinction because they don't, like, for you or your people, because they don't stop. Like, you turn your cheek and they don't stop hitting. That's the human instinct, at least in me, is like, thinking about that, like, at what point is it right to commit the same act just to stop the onslaught of violence, or to at least counterbalance it. But when I think about that rationally, that still doesn't really solve the problem, right? It literally leads to more of that nonstop, just tit for tat. I'm mad at them because they were mad at me. I wronged them because they wronged me. And then it's like a back and forth. The path of a righteous person is surrounded on all sides by the selfish and the wicked. Pulp Fiction 3:16. So it's just really interesting to me. I don't know where that leads, but it was just an interesting thought. Sorry, I wasn't meaning to get like super deep. I just don't know why that thought came up, but it's definitely something I think I need to work on. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Okay, so we are filling out colors. We're talking about strangely profound things. Could be cognitive distortions in therapy terms. One aspect is justifying your acts that goes against your own values. Yeah. Well, that's what I've started realizing is like the damage that's done. And I think that Gandhi definitely knew this. Like, I've read his writings and stuff. And don't get me wrong, the guy wasn't perfect. From what I hear, he wasn't so great with women. But like, one of the things I think he clued into was the idea that it's not worth the cost of what it does to you to react in the same way. I just don't think it's worth you losing your center and your values and stuff like that. Like, I feel like the only loss by like kind of reacting in a way that of what was done to you is yourself. Like, it doesn't, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like, I think the only loss is to the soul of the people who are trying to get retribution. Right now, put your, Jim said, right now is to put your money where your mouth is. Time. Be better than our worst instinct. Yeah. I think that's it. I think our base instincts are going to drive us for retribution, and sometimes that retribution is going to seem real justified. sometimes it is really justified, right? But at what cost? Like, I guess that's what I've been thinking about, is like, what's the cost of that very justified thing? Kind of reminds me of when I was younger. I really loved debating. And I remember meeting older people who were a lot wiser and would pretty much just point out the typical debate thing, which is like, so you win the debate and then what? Right? And then you're like, well, then you win and you're right and stuff like that. And I remember, a much wiser older person telling me what I would probably tell a younger person now, which is, so you win and then what? Like, great. What did you get? Like, did anything good come out of that win? Right? Because usually when you argue with people, right, you'll feel good in the moment, but at the end of it, even if you win the argument, you really are kind of the loser of the whole exchange. Because at the end of the day, like, and this is a hard thing for me to say, because I do think there's value in exchanging ideas and in the art of debate and stuff like that. But it's like, I think that, and again, I also think, there are definitely times where it's really good to kind of speak out against something that's wrong, and that kind of thing. But I could definitely see in myself like an area I need to grow where, like just remembering that there's a cycle that can just continually be fed. And as corny as it is, by like hate, and that I can feed into that cycle or choose to just not participate in that cycle, I think is like a really important thing, as corny as that is. So, yeah. So that's something that's been on my mind lately. I don't know why. Yeah. But it's made me realize the value of the turn the other cheek thing, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, that was the part that's baffled me for years, because I can think of a million times where, why would you turn the other cheek? Like, that's usually the ultimate, like, just fight back, dude, kind of thing. That's like my base instinct, is to respond with that. And I think there's more wisdom to it than like what I've given it credit for, So yeah. And then Dylan said, I want to write a book of short stories based on cognitive distortion of going against your values. The MC is a priest. He slowly lets in the devil, even though he thinks he's still acting for God. That's a good point. Yeah. So it's just a tough time, because it's like, things are divisive and kind of powder kegged here. And I think some of those things are very justifiably divisive, and there's justifiable retribution that people are wanting to have. But I just was trying to think about like where that stops, right? Because if at least when I was teaching history, it does seem like that's the cycle of history, is like, one wrong done against a country or something like that, and then the other country responds because the country before it. And it kind of becomes like kids who are like, well, I hit them because they hit me, and then they hit me because I hit them, and then the friend hits them because why'd you hit my friend? And it becomes this whole just cycle, and it's like there's no end to that kind of circle. It's interesting, and I don't even know if turning the other cheek is the solution to that. Like I think in a weird way, I kind of suspect that there is no solution to that. And that the whole point of the turn the other cheek thing isn't really for like a solution. It's more like for your soul, like for yourself. Because otherwise you get stuck in the cycle, and it's like this weird loop that has happened since the beginning of time, So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, but it's a thought that kind of came across my mind was to be a little cautious before feeding that cycle or that circle of violence, You know what I'm saying, man? I feel like an old hippie now. Okay, so I have a song that I recorded that I'm going to play for you guys while I work on coloring this page. Would you like to hear a song? Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can find it. Get it all set up for you guys. You look at that. There it is. This is unmastered. So it's the first time I've shared this ever. Hopefully you guys like it. Let me see if I can get it in there. All right, I think it's ready.
Did I say something wrong? Sometimes I come across too strong and ramble on and on and on. And it's all part of a song. I try to sing, but it's too long. I try to sing, but it's too long.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to play that one more time because I had weird audio settings on it. Okay, are you guys ready? Here we go.
Did I say something wrong? Sometimes I come across too strong and ramble on and on and on. And it's all part of a song. I try to sing, but it's too long. I try to sing, but it's too long. So just say what you believe. What it is you think about me. Is it as bad as I believe? Stuck in my skin over my bones. Born in a place I did not decide. Darker my thoughts, sometimes they haunt me. Can I make it out of this alive? So deep is my dark shadow. So deep is my dark shadow. Did I say something right? This time nobody wants to fight. I finally got some sleep last night, and it's all feeling so right. Like trying to see without my sight. Like trying to see without my sight. So say what you believe. What it is you think about me. Is it as bad as I believe? So deep is my dark shadow. Stuck in my skin over my bones. dark shadow, so deep is mine. Dark shadow.
All right, so that was the song that I finished today. I think I recorded a lot of that track on a live stream too, just musically, but I was pretty stoked about how it came out, the lyrics and all that stuff. Yeah. And that one, just like the themes are kind of like, you know, like depression and how, you know, like when you struggle with depression, generally it's like this dark shadow that's kind of hanging out, ready to pounce at any time. And then, you know, when you get older and you start learning how to kind of deal with depression and stuff like that, you kind of recognize it a little more as like this dark shadow that's just kind of hanging out all the time. Like it's ready to mess up your thinking and stuff at a moment's notice. So that's the theme of that song. Not all my songs are about that kind of stuff, but yeah, it was. I thought it came out pretty good. I can't wait to hear the master of it, because I have a good friend. I think Tankersley made an American History X joke, which I think is very funny. I don't know if that's the case, but it sounded like the case. I don't know. Tankersley, let me know if I'm off on that reference. Yeah, so like, I don't know. It's been an interesting few days, like thought wise and stuff like that. But I do think like determinism's worth looking into. I do. I actually think it's started to really exercise my my own personal philosophy has grown from it a little bit. Just thinking about what if it's possible, like if that's a possibility. How then would I approach my day to day? You know, I don't know. I think that's it's man. I've been saying interesting a lot. Dylan said, "Good song so far." Thank you. Yeah, I can't wait for the master. It'll be fun. Yeah, and sorry about the false start there. I think I started it halfway and then was like, that wasn't quite working. I'm still figuring out the audio stuff on just doing straight OBS. What does Tankersley say here? Yeah, we'll go with that. Let's see here. So we have this stuff all here. All right, and then we've got basically Elizabeth's skin tone to kind of fill in. Hopefully you guys are working on some stuff. I think art is a good escape from that cycle too that I was talking about, because I think there's something cathartic about stories and stuff like that. Like even like the guest we had on Artcasters, he was saying that, you know, because he does a lot of like horror art. And he was saying, like, I was mentioning that, like, some of the nicest people you'll meet on the planet are people who are, like, really into, like, death metal. And also people who are, like, super into horror movies. And he was kind of attributing it to, like, yeah, they work out their kind of demons in, like, on the page, right? And in music. And so it's, like, they've kind of dealt with like the darker thoughts and stuff. So generally like because of that, they're nicer people, you know? I thought that was an interesting take on it, you know? Let's see here. Dylan says, I'm eating din din. Nice. Dinner is the best. I had some wonderful dinner. Yeah. Dylan was saying, I agree with what David said. Yeah. Cause I think sometimes like some of the meanest people you'll meet are like, listen to like very positive music. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I think some people, I don't know, some of the darkest people you meet buy Thomas Kincaid paintings. Does that make sense? Like, they've got Thomas Kincaid's up on the wall, and they're like the most hateful, angry people in the world. But they're like, but I love pretty cottages. It's like, I don't know. That's just like extending David's hypothesis there. Like, I'm trying to remember. I think my wife is watching something now, so she won't be able to help me out here. Because she would know. But there's this teacher in the Harry Potter stories who's like prim and proper, and she pretty much like tortures all the kids. Like, but like on paper, she looks like the most straight-laced, like, value-filled like person, and she ends up being like one of the most evil instructors there, right? I can't remember that. Who the name? If you guys in chat remember, you'll let me know. Cultish Swifties, said Dylan. I have heard if you get on the wrong side of the Swifties, it's like you can end up. Like, I have heard that people who've talked crap about Taylor Swift have like had like careers ruined over that kind of thing. Swifties are pretty hardcore. They do love their Taylor Swift. They're swift to react. They're the key source of the culture of violence, really, in reality. Like, the murder rate in our country would be a lot lower if there weren't so many vengeful Swifties swiftly making retribution. What was that teacher's name, though? I wish I could remember the teacher's name in Harry Potter. The one that on paper would look like a real, 1950s housewife type character. Okay, what do we got here? We have to do this part that comes down. Okay, I need to check that on the previous pages, how I approached that, because I might have messed up.
His name is Umbridge.
Umbridge! There we go. I knew my wife would know it. I knew it. I knew it all along, guys. It was Umbridge. Screaming Mad George Prince. Nice. Oh, it was May who knew it. Okay, that's awesome. Giving credit to my wife when it was her sister who had it the whole time. All right, we're getting there, guys. There's just one or two more little pretty happy clouds to put in there. I do sometimes wonder if I had kind of a more, kind of like, well, hello there, friends, kind of way of doing live streams. I wonder if that would have like kind of a cult-like following effect, where it's like, we're making very pretty little colors here. Look at these beautiful colors that we're making right now. Let's just put in a pretty yellow. And right next to that pretty yellow, oh, look at that. Look how gorgeous that color came out. Would you guys still be subscribed if I was doing that? And we're making some happy, pretty selections here of colors. And look at that. Isn't that, wow. Well, what do you know? What do you know? Every cloud needs a friend. Exactly. You'll notice there's a lot of friend clouds up there. Dylan was saying, I hate Umbridge. Yeah, but like, I feel like she's a really good character study of that type. Like, you know, like how the villains aren't always wearing, you know, villainous clothing, you know? Paul just joined and said, what did you say? Man, I zonked out hard. Nice. Oh, late there. How late? Tankersley said, don't start talking like that. I'll just make fun of you, dude. Well, that's okay. If it's not your... I'm just going to talk like that from now on. Bob Ross had an audience and he talked that way. I love Bob Ross, man. I think Bob Ross, I went through a phase a couple years ago where I was like binging Bob Ross videos. I was like, I finally hit an age where he made sense to me. I think when I was younger, I also used to troll my art teacher by like, so one of my, I think I've mentioned him before, but my amazing life painting teacher, he's literally one of the best painters I've ever seen. Very accomplished painter. And he was not a fan of Bob Ross. And so I remember somehow I stumbled upon a Bob Ross palette knife and I would bring it to class and just like, because it had like Bob Ross's face on it. I would bring it to class and very boldly use my palette knife to like mix stuff. And he would get so bothered by it because he's like, no, not the Bob Ross. Like he hated Bob Ross so much. He would get so angry. And it was kind of wonderful. It was it was momentous. I think I had a Bob Ross brush too that I would use just to like mess with him. I think the first time I brought it to class, like he didn't notice and I was trying to make it really obvious. So I finally think it was like maybe the second day of class or third day of class where I was like, Yuji, and he's like, what? And I'm like, what do you think of my paintbrush? Like I wanted a reaction so bad. But he looked so frustrated and flustered with it. It was so worth it. By the way, that teacher ended up loving me by the end of the semester, but it's just funny. Dylan said that accent kind of sounds like the woman in your ad who killed her husband. Yeah, it just, you know, you kind of feel like there's some darkness hiding when you meet somebody who's that calm. And they're kind of like, well, look at these pretty colors here. And then look at this. This is the meditation and beauty of working on art. Right now, we're making little pretty pictures together. Very beautiful pictures together, sparkly pictures. And we're just filled with joy and elation over the creation of our own very personal art pieces. Just piecing together our own personal piece of world peace as we're doing our pieces together. Pieces of pieces. There is something like charming about that. Like I'm trying to remember what the home shopping network type, you know, like the craft channel type. Like there is something kind of fun about that, but there's also something so dark about it. Like, would you be surprised if you were watching like Home Shopping Network and and it turns out that like one of the Home Shopping Network hosts ends up being like a serial killer. Like, would that really surprise you? I don't know. It wouldn't really surprise me. I don't know if that makes sense. Like there's like a you know, the one exception of it that I can think of that's like somebody who had kind of like a calm kind of perfect demeanor that you kind of didn't get the subtext that they were just burying all like unhealthily like bottling up all their emotions. I would think of Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers is one of the few where when I watch Mr. Rogers, like he has a similar cadence to the type of person I was talking about, but I never get the vibe that there's like something nefarious there. I always just get like complete sincerity from the read of Mr. Rogers. Like that's just kind of how he is. Like even when he testifies in front of Congress, it's just like, no, this was just a guy who was just super chill and had just like a super chill voice because he was super chill. But you know, there is always that interesting Home Shopping Network host thing where you can tell when the cameras go off, they're just like a complete nightmare to all their coworkers and stuff. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, you know, like someone where you're like, wow, this sounds like you're chill and stuff, but there's some darkness there that like you're not showing us, you know? I definitely have had that with some people, but I feel like Mr. Rogers, for some reason, Mr. Rogers, he definitely would have noticed if I had rocked an afro for sure. Although my hair like wants to, like right now, I haven't had a haircut in a while. And my dad actually kind of did have like a Bob Ross-ish look to him. For those of you who don't know, my dad used to look quite a lot like Jerry Garcia. People would bump into my dad and tell him he looked like Jerry Garcia. They'd be like, you know who you look like? That you look like Jerry Garcia. All right, guys, 2 more panels to go on the stream. I'm trying to bust through it as quickly as possible because I want to go watch Philip's stream after the fact. Let me see, my tea's done. My tea's gone cold. I wonder why. Okay. I'm here all day with bad jokes. Why did I get out of bed at all? Okay, we're going to select these last 2. And then let's make this happen, Captain. We go up here. I'm going to select the sky. I'm going to go up here and select the sky. Select, modify, expand. We're going to make the sky that beautiful purple. Purple. Good. Okay. Getting there. But it was fun trolling my old art teacher with the Bob Ross stuff. So back in the day, I used to like ironically like Bob Ross, you know, like you'd carry like a Bob Ross lunch pail or something just as a joke. And quite often like art stores would kind of sell like Bob Ross stuff almost as like a meme. And so initially I got into Bob Ross kind of the same way I initially got into Al Green, where when I first started listening to Al Green, it was like, it was a bit, like it was a joke, and it was meant to be like memey, like really funny and ironic. But much like Al Green, like eventually I sincerely grew to like, actually really like Bob Ross. Like I think Bob Ross is amazing. And those videos are like super fun to watch. I can see why people like them. Even though I don't like I'm not a fan of his paintings, but it's like I'm a fan of him and what he was doing, and I can see why people were into it because it's really cool. And also, he did stuff like he'd nurse like a squirrel. I mean, he seems like he was a good dude, like nursing like a squirrel and stuff. And then I remember finding out in his biography, like, I guess he used to be like a drill sergeant, and he was like he had like anger issues and stuff like that. And then art had been like a way for him to like free himself from like anger and hate and stuff. And I was like, well, I mean, what's not to like about this guy's story? Like, he's amazing. But then when it comes to Al Green, like a similar thing happened, except Al Green, it was like even more profound because I realized it wasn't ironic that I liked Al Green. I just realized he's like one of the best songwriters who ever lived. And so like Al Green's probably like one of my top favorite musicians of all time. But it's funny because at first it was kind of like, yeah, this is love music kind of stuff, you know? And then after a while, it's like I just started really admiring the compositions and the music and like the session musicians he'd record with. Like, it's just some of the best recordings ever like put to wax, you know? So I guess they're not totally similar because like with Kincaid Kincaid is totally different. With Bob Ross, like he's kind of a trick painter. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, it's kind of like a guitarist who knows really flashy like hammer-ons and stuff. It's like kind of like that with Bob Ross, where he's a really good trick painter, where he learned a method that he just repeats and basically makes the same painting over and over and over again. But it worked, and it's his hustle, and it made him happy, and it made a lot of people happy. So, and I think he seems like a good dude, and it's strangely meditative and relaxing and fun to watch his channel. So like I'm a fan of him as a person, not so much his art. Whereas with Al Green, I'm all in. Like, I think he's just an incredible musician. So maybe that wasn't the best comparison. But it is one of those things, like, I don't know if you guys have ever had that that with anyone where, you know, you start liking something kind of ironically and almost sarcastically, and then you actually grow to love it for real. Because there's definitely, I have a lot of little instances like that. Probably because when I was younger, I was a lot snobbier too about like what I would like and dislike. Now I want to make a poll about Bob Ross and see what you guys have to say about him. But I have to figure out a good question about Bob Ross for you guys to answer. And look at the shade and tone that we're doing here of these lips. Sometimes when I'm drawing lips, it makes me happy because I think of kissing. Like, I really do think I should do a whole stream like that and see if it works. That would be fun. Where it's like, well, hi there, friends. Welcome to our world art building time, where we're going to work together and build worlds of magnificent illustrations and art. And we're going to just celebrate color of all kinds by making a beautiful arrangement of them under our wonderful squiggly lines here. And we're just squiggling those lines and just enjoying it. And when I'm coloring hair, it makes me think of all the haircuts that are just so fabulous that people get all the time. And we're just cutting out that hair and thinking of our own hair. And whilst we're doing that, we're starting to feel our minds soar to joy and peaks of excitement and happiness. Tankersley said, which lips? His squirrel was Peapod, yeah. And like, it's the cutest thing ever. He like, like the guy's story is really inspiring because again, he was like a drill sergeant who was like plagued with like anger issues. Like he couldn't manage his anger. He was like supposedly like a horrible person to work with when he was in the military. And then when he got out of the military, he just got tired of being like hateful and angry. And he found that like the act of painting was like his release. Like it was like the thing that made him like chill as a person and care about like people and like animals. And so like it's, I don't know, man, like Bob Ross is inspiring as hell. Like and he like and people in his life like, you know, attest to the fact that the guy had like a 180 when he started painting. He just became like a much better human being. And it's like, what a cool story, you know, like what is not to like about that story? You know, and actually it was just such a weird idea to be like, hey, let's have a show where you like paint and people watch, you know? Tankersley said he left the military and discovered Valium. But I think it's just great that like, I don't know. I like stories, like biographies where people change. Because I think like the more jaded view I'll have sometimes, like sometimes you'll get the vibe that people don't really change. Like they just kind of behave the same. And remembering that people can have like a 180 and become a much better person, I think is really cool. It's like, I don't know. It's a nice story to believe, you know, I don't know. It's encouraging is my point. Anyone seen the movie Paint with Owen Wilson? No, I haven't. Is it good? It looked really hilarious. Like, because it's kind of loosely based on him, right? I remember seeing the ads for it and wanting to see it, but then I'm an old man, so quite often what happens is there'll be a really interesting looking movie, and I'll be like, yeah, I got to watch that. And then like 5 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I was going to watch that. Tankersley said I was just joking about the Valium thing. Yeah, I don't think he actually found Valium, but it's cool that he found a better way of like being around people, you know, like, you know, and kind of changed for the good, and that art had something to do with that. I think that's pretty cool. And I think there's probably some truth to that. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that points to art being very therapeutic for people to do, being a very relaxing, like meditative process. Because you kind of have to focus on it. Even while I'm doing these live streams, it's like I'm not fully focused on what I'm talking about. I'm focusing on the task at hand, you know, which is making these pages. And so, you know, I don't know. I think there's some truth to that. Like, I think art can change people. Probably could change people for the worse too, right? Like there might be some people who are like great people and then they get that ego boost from being, you know, an artist or whatever and getting known, and maybe they become a terrible person. I don't know. It's I'm sure it's a two-way thing where it could go bad, you know. Tankersley said, yes, loosely, I never got to see it, but I want to. Yeah, I do too. Yeah, and I like Owen Wilson. I think he's great in a lot of movies, so. One of my favorite movies is The Royal Tenenbaums, because I'm a big fan of J.D. Salinger, and it's pretty much just the Glass family. Like, The Royal Tenenbaums is, like, pretty much Franny and Zoe. It's like the almost a direct like rip of like the Glass family by Salinger. But it's one of my favorite movies. It's a great movie. And Owen Wilson's great in it. All right, guys. We're getting there. We're getting there. We got our flats for Elizabeth to do. And then I got a flat Elizabeth in the other panel. But we're getting strangely close to finished, which is good because I need to work on homework for the rest of the night, probably into the wee hours of the morning. So here we go. We're kind of making that happen. But yeah, I do feel like sometimes people get put in like a box as if they're going to remain exactly the same for like their entire life. And I think sometimes people will take that to heart. Like if they're kind of convinced that they cannot change, they'll like take that to heart. And so you have some people, especially around my age, where you have some people who just double down on being terrible, you know, and that's not great, you know. And I kind of get why, because at my age there is a beautiful thing that happens where you kind of almost care less about what people think. Like I'm not as self-conscious as I used to be, and so that's a benefit. But there's also a thing about my age where, you know, if you've been a jerk your whole life and you hit my age, you're probably most like there's a chance that you will probably maybe use that superpower of getting older and kind of caring less in the wrong way and kind of retain just being a complete nightmare of a person. So it's like it's a plus and a minus. Like it could be really bad getting to that point where you have less self-consciousness and care less about what other people think. For me, it's been a net positive, and I like to think that I have made and continue to make progress trying to be a better person. But I could see how that kind of becomes dangerous. People get really embedded in who they are, which is why I think it's so fascinating when you have somebody like Bob Ross, who seemed to have like such a just monumental change. Hi, Gary. We're talking about good evening, Gary. I love how Gary says good evening when he joins. We were having a discussion about Bob Ross. That was fun. How you doing, Gary? How's the book coming? I'm imagining you might be finished, but I don't know. Am I crazy? You're pretty close. This is I'm speaking of Gary Hodges, the artist behind Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots, which are available at his Etsy site. All right, we're getting closer, guys. We're getting closer by the dozen. We've had some fun conversations. I talked a little bit earlier about like the cycle of violence and how does that stop? Like at what point does the I wrong this person because they wrong this person because they wrong this person thing stop? And then we've talked, let's see, we talked about Bob Ross. We talked about, I talked about some of the scariest people being the people with like the voice that's like this and they're very nice. Talked about that for a little bit. We were kind of playing with the idea, like, what if I had, like, if I hosted this show like that, would people be on board? Gary said he hasn't finished, but he's getting close. Okay, let me see if there's more to that chat in a second. Yeah, he said page 50 of 58. 8 more pages? That's like, that is definitely within swinging distance, you know? Very exciting, Gary. Okay, guys, we're getting closer. I'm just gonna, at this point, let's get the rest of that sky color in there. And of course, save. Saving's always a good thing to do. One of the worst things about being an artist when you're working digitally is if you work for like a couple hours and you forget to hit save. I'm sure we've all had it happen, but there's that terrifying moment, like your computer freezes or whatever, and you can't, like, you've just wasted hours and you're like, oh, it's the worst. But the nice thing about it is it's so bad when it does happen that it's usually a good reminder for like a couple years to like hit save all the time. And then if you're like me, you'll forget and then have to re-experience the trauma of losing hours of work again and again and again. And each time you go another couple years, you know, remembering, yeah, save all the time. Okay. We're getting there. We're getting so close, you guys. Okay. I'm going to do Sophie's dress now. Tankersley said, I use paper so I don't have to hit save. Yes. That is the nice thing about when I'm working on 2 stories. I do everything traditionally on that book. And so I do not have that same issue when I'm working traditionally. It's a fair point. Actually, I'm really excited about when I do get to the point of being able to work on book 2 of 2 stories, because a lot of the grunt work's done on that. All the roughs are done. They're printed out. And I had already started original pages for it when we got the deal for this book. So I'm excited about being able to return to it. That can be like juice that kind of gets you through a project too, is like, you know, you're going to start cooking ideas for the next project or aching to do the next project while you're doing a current project. That can be kind of incentive to get it done. It's like dessert after a meal kind of thing where you're like, okay, I'll eat my broccoli here because I know that dessert is being able to like move on to that next project, you know? Anyhow, Gary, one of the things you might have missed was I think some of the worst people I've ever met are people who collect Thomas Kincaid paintings. Like, it's just a certain... And if you collect Thomas Kincaid paintings, which I know Gary is an avid collector of Thomas Kincaid, they have all of the Sparkle Cottages signed and numbered. Gary was frequenting the mall store all the time. I know this, but no, anyhow, all kidding aside, I really do actually kind of believe that. I think a lot of people, some of the darkest houses you'll be in are houses that have like a saying on the wall where it'll be like happy house, happy dinner, happy mealtime or whatever. It's like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like those, like you see them if you go to like a Ross or something. There's like the generic wall plaque about like peace in this household or whatever, and it's like those are like the houses to be like afraid of, man. I wonder if a horror movie has like played that up before, because if they haven't, they should. You know, like just all the wall plaque quotes that are like a platitude that's about, you know, peace and serenity in the home or whatever. Because I feel like anytime I've ever gone to a house like that, there's a weird feeling, man. It's like a weird feeling, like you go in there and you feel like these knives they have for cooking aren't for cooking, they're for murder. Like I could just tell from like the vibes of this like positivity household. I don't know if that's crazy of me, but that's my suspicion, you know. And And I'm not talking about like cool retro vintagey signs or something. I'm talking about, you know, the ones that are like the Serenity quotes throughout the house. You got to beware of those houses. That's all I'm saying. Those houses are hiding something. Live, love, laugh type of decor. Exactly. Yes, exactly that, right? Yeah, I feel like that's a real red flag to me. Always keep your food knives separate from your burger knives, Tankersley said. In those houses, they don't even keep them separate. They're just the same one. The exact same one, you know? No, I guess it's like Stepford Wives kind of vibes, you know, with Thomas Kincaid paintings. It brings up the Stepford Wives kind of creepiness, you know, where you're like, what's being hidden here behind that pretty cottage, you know? Like, why are they, what's under that glitter? Why did he decide to add glitter to his painting? There's something under that glitter that's real dark. You know, is that just me? I don't know. There's something creepy about Thomas Kincaid paintings. The darkness of Thomas Kincaid. I mean, power to the guy for getting a hustle, you know? Like, I'm not gonna hate on another artist for having a hustle. But I'm just saying there's something real dark. There's like a subtext of like strange, like suburban rage in a Thomas Kincaid household, you know? Suburban rage. And I get that vibe. Like, the only person who had that like friendly voice thing on a TV show where I was like, oh, this person's actually like really friendly is Mr. Rogers. Like, Mr. Rogers was the only one I bought. Like, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Like, I've never thought that guy had like some darker motive, you know? He's just amazing. And then you watch the documentary and you realize, like, no, he just sincerely is like just this really good, patient, like peaceful dude. But there is that voice that's kind of similar to Mr. Rogers. You know, every once in a while you'll meet somebody who's got a voice like that. And there's this subtext of like just this underlayer of like psychotic rage, like just buried underneath the like, and look at how pretty this painting is. Look how beautiful this red color that I'm working on is. It's just magical. You know, there's something about that cadence where there's like an underbelly of rage and a passive aggression that's like beyond belief, you know, but it's like happy. I don't know if that makes sense. Oh no, Dylan said we had some of Thomas Kincaid's paintings growing up. Oh no, Dylan. Oh no, I'm sorry. Did you grow up in a murder house, Dylan? I just feel like there's always something bubbling under the surface of those kind of things. It's kind of the genius of that, like, Five Nights at Freddy's thing. I finally got to play that because my son convinced me to play it. And what's interesting is I thought it was going to be this just like crazy horror game. You know, I didn't realize you're literally just sitting in a room watching flickering monitors, you know. But I think that the genius of that was to take something like the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics that are just inherently creepy, and there's like a dark corporate thing like lingering underneath, and just exploiting that for like a horror thing, you know? I think we all know it. It's like when there's just like that animatronic that's smiling a little too much, you know? It's just like there's a uncanny valley thing that happens. And I've definitely met people like that before, for sure. That like there's an uncanny valley of like the happiness, like the smiles, just there's something there that's like lingering under the kindness where you're like, you're not kind, you know? Like you meet them and you're like, ooh, you're one to watch out for, you know? Like, or maybe I'm just weird and like I just get that vibe because I'm a bad person. I don't know. Dylan was saying that's why people don't like them, Uncanny Valley. I don't like them because they don't feel authentic. And that's, I mean, that's a taste thing. But one of the reasons I don't like Thomas Kinkade paintings is they don't have any authenticity to me. They seem like very devoid of any like deeper meaning. But that's a vibe thing. Like I'm sure there's people out there who like maybe they really feel like he was genuinely making these like beautiful expressions of art, because he wasn't a bad painter at all. It's just there was something about it that just to me felt really like generic and like uncaring about the work. Like I don't know if that makes sense. They kind of have the same vibe as like a Happy Face or something, you know, where it's like, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like a symbol that's supposed to make you feel a certain way, but the feeling isn't there. Like it's just a symbol. I don't know if that makes sense. Dylan said maybe that's why, but there is something uncanny valley about it. And I think it's not that it's so detailed. I think it's, I think that's the thing. It's a painting meant to make you feel a certain way, but it feels like a painting with no feeling, you know? I think that's what's creepy about animatronics is like they're supposed to look like they're smiling, but like behind it, you know, there's like a robotic contraption that has no feeling, you know? That's why people use like those talk dummies or whatever in horror movies all the time, right? There's something really uncanny about like it's talking and it's moving, but it's like soulless, right? Yeah. Let's see here. But I know Kinkade was like a pretty talented artist. Like he, I think he went to art center and like he learned painting, and he was like an illustrator for like years before he kind of found that that hustle, you know. And so again, I never want to hate on an artist's hustle. Like if, dude, like how cool would that be if any of us had a certain genre we do blow up to the point where you could successfully open stores in like malls across the country and get people to like, you know, support your work. And then eventually have a whole group of people who do your paintings for you so that you can actually do the paintings you want to do. You know, I don't hate the guy. I don't hate Thomas Kinkade. I just don't like the kind of, I don't like the paintings. Does that make sense? Yeah, Dylan said like a cult leader's smile. 100%. Like when you see a documentary, you know, where they're interviewing like the leader of a cult, there's even cult followers too, where there's kind of like this dark subtext of like the thing they're hiding when they're talking. And you can kind of tell. Yeah, Dylan was saying he made millions from it. He probably made hundreds of millions from his work. Yeah, he definitely made it. I'm not going to hate the guy for that. And there are definitely people who like were like moved by it, you know, like they loved his work, like they collected it, like, you know, it was a thing. It was like a huge thing. And there's a lot of people out there who love Thomas Kincaid's paintings. But I just think those households are hiding something. That's all. Like I feel like it's like a facade or something. I don't know if that makes sense. It's hard to actually describe why those creep me out. One of my favorite things, though, that was a trend for a while, and the guy who did Pee-wee's Playhouse, the art for Pee-wee's Playhouse, he had a documentary on Netflix about him, and he was doing this trend too, where people would go to like thrift stores and they would find like Thomas Kincaid, like forest type paintings, you know, done by like amateur painters, like landscapes and stuff like that were done and then eventually given to a thrift store. And they would like paint over the landscape. Like they'd paint like something cool over the landscape. So it would be like using the, you know, using the old thrift store painting. And then like, you know, there were people who would like paint like Star Wars scenes over it. So they'd like paint like speeder bikes into like the forest scene, or they paint like a giant robot, like torching the cottage. And then in the case of the guy who did Pee-wee's Playhouse, he'd do these giant typographic works over it and stuff. And that's amazing. I love when people were doing that. I think they still do it, but I don't think it's as common. But it was like a whole thing years ago, you know? But yes, I agree with Dylan in the sense that, you know, the guy made it. And again, like I would wish that on like all of my friends, like that they would have a success in their art that allowed them to fund and do whatever they want, you know, with their life, because their art's been so successful. I don't envy this. I don't hate this success. I think the success is an amazing story, and the guy probably hustled and worked his butt off for it. So again, I don't think that's what I dislike about the paintings. They just don't, to me, they just don't feel authentic. That's the main gripe I have with a Thomas Kincaid. It's kind of like elevator music. Like elevator music is musically not bad. Like there's a lot of great jazz musicians, you know, and studio musicians who maybe might be making the best music of their lives outside of the studio session work they're doing. But then there's like this cold, like detached, like kind of blandness to like the way elevator music sounds. Like it could be almost like the songs aren't recognizable, right? They all kind of sound very similar. But again, they're doing complex stuff. Like they're doing like crazy jazz type progressions, but unlike jazz, it's kind of like a lot of jazz has like a vibe to it, like a soul to it, and like some love to it. Like you listen to Charlie Parker or something, and it doesn't feel like he doesn't care. Like it feels like autorial, I guess, or authorial. I don't know. Not ethereal, but like it's got the sense of an author to it, right? But then there's a certain brand of jazz, like the elevator music kind of thing, where it's like it's hard to explain, but it's like, you know it when you hear it. It's like technically proficient, but just it's like saying a lot without saying any, like it really isn't saying anything, you know? Dylan said, well, they aren't authentic, right? Wasn't he some sort of SOB? I think Thomas Kincaid was kind of a jerk from what I hear. But he was a good businessman, and I'll give him that. Like, man, I mean, like, you know, I think any of us, like if we could like retire and hire a studio of people to paint cottages for us and get licensing fees for having our names on it. And that's what she did for a living. Dude, how cool would that be? You know, because that would free you up to make whatever art you wanted. And I think even in his case, from what I understand, he did a lot of cityscapes. That's where his passion was. And so he used to do a lot of cityscapes that wouldn't sell well. But he would do them, and they were funded. His time to do that was funded by all the cottages, you know, like that people just wanted the cottages. And so it's kind of equivalent to being like a studio musician. You had a big hit with Britney Spears and you hate the song, but hey, that tour with Britney Spears paid your way to do the real stuff. I'm not going to hate on that. Like, again, why would I hate on that? That's how a lot of artists make a living. Dude, a lot of stuff I've done commercially is not like the most amazing work, you know? So I'm not going to knock somebody for like making a living as an artist. I just don't like his art. His cottages. You ever notice that easy listening music is just so hard to listen to? All right, guys. Yes, I have noticed that. Although it's funny because there's like a brand of easy listening stuff that I like. I would say like the Tijuana Brass is almost easy listening, and I love that. But it's partially because I grew up with like my parents used to listen to that all the time. And so there is a part of me when I hear like Tijuana Brass, I get like, woohoo, this is awesome. Like, it is kind of amazing. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is wrong. I need to undo it. I'm going to pick these areas in the clouds, the pretty white clouds, and then I'm going to expand that selection, and then I'll pick the sky. And then we're going to color hold the clouds and the sky, just the interior of the clouds and the sky, which I've done on one sky, but I should have waited till I had done the other skies. And then we're home free. And I get to do homework till like the wee hours of the morning. Select, modify, expand. So we're going to expand our selection here, ladies and gentlemen, in a pretty enjoyable way. We're going to pick this beautiful sky behind us. Such a lovely sky. There's nothing wrong in the world when you're thinking about that sky. And then I'm going to grab this. We're going to cut it. I'm going to paste in place. Oh. Okay, and then I'm going to lock the transparent pixels. Lock them transparent pixels. All right. And now I'm going to basically darken this just a little bit. You know what? I'm going to darken it here so I can replicate it. We'll go even darker. Go Shift F5. Let's make it a little more. Shift F5. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do the same to my old color hold. Oh my gosh. And then I'm going to go to 0, and we have finished a page, ladies and gentlemen. Ooh, ladies and gentlemen, we have finished a page here, and it's looking mighty good, if you ask me. Okay. Color held. Going to save. I'm going to say thank you, guys. I'm going to suggest that you hit like and hit the bell so you get notifications when I go live next. And if you guys were enjoying this, I know this was a shorter stream than the last one, but we finished the colors. And I know that I believe Philip Chandler is streaming on his channel. So go hop over, hang out with Philip. I will see you guys on the next live stream. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you got some work done. And And I hope this inspired you in some way. So, or if not, at least entertained you. Thank you for choosing to spend a couple hours on Saturday with me. And I will see you guys on the